Welcome everybody to a very special video. I'm joined by Ed, who has just come off the back of winning Disney Lorcana Challenge Fort Worth. Ed, how's it going? Ruby Amethyst, you've got the magic brooms in there, Ed. Talk to me about the magic brooms in this deck. That's where I want to start.
Yeah, so Magic Broom, I've always played Magic Broom. In Chicago, I also played Magic Broom, but I was playing the Cusco, no Sisu, no Flynn style of the deck,
Okay.
with like two Teeth and Ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I thought it made sense because that was, kind of like six brawls against Diablo.
Yeah.
And yeah, so the main boogeyman of the format is the Bucky Diablo, right? If you
Sure.
don't have an answer to Diablo, you're basically dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, brooms were a good way to kind of cycle your deck through to find the key pieces of like brawl, um, friends, and be prepared,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know I think there's like a huge, debate right now in the community, like, oh, we should play for Chernobog so we can like fit space for, Tremaines, BKUs. But I thought that the consistency of the deck was a little bit lacking in kind of that version of the deck. Like if you think about it fundamentally, it was like 4 1-drops and then 16 uninkables, right?
Yeah.
So like when I played that version, it led to a lot of like brick hands. And I think in a lot of my feature matches, I had like a Broom and a Chernobog. And sometimes you don't open Flynn Sisu, right? Like the game's really easy. You can open Flynn Sisu, Rabbit, plays itself, right?
Sure.
But I think the games that you don't open that, you kind of have to maneuver around to get to a hand that's actually playable. So I think one of the main things that I felt like gave me an edge was that all my hands were at least somewhat playable. So even if you just have Broom and Chernobogs, you can go turn 1 Broom and then pop it in turn 2 with a Chernobog, and it's not even like that bad because you can still block the Flynn Rider, right? And I think that was like the main reason why people were like, "Oh, you shouldn't play Magic Broom. It doesn't block Flynn Rider."
Mm.
But in a way, it kind of does because you can also bounce it back with Snake and block it that way as well, or pop it for Chernobog or Flynn Rider. Something else that was also I noticed was if you're on the play and you're able to do like 1-drop Flynn Sisu, you're in the mirror. Basically, your opponent can't really do anything about that, right? Your hand size will always be smaller than theirs, even if they also open
Yeah.
a Flynn Sisu.
So they would have to go
So
like Brawl on turn 3, for example,
yeah,
which is
you're
very
forcing
slow.
the brawl basically. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're forcing the brawl, or you're even like B King is not even good in that spot, right? Because I'm just gonna sit on my Magic Broom or Chernobog the whole time,
Yeah.
and I'll just sacrifice that. So basically, it made the mirror more favored, in my opinion.
That's so fascinating. I think we've seen like a lot of people. Maybe I've been saying cut the Maleficents for the brooms, but
Hmm.
you've got both of them in there. And I mean, when I've played Ruby Amethyst, which is not all that much, I've always just felt like the 4 1-drops is just crazy to me. I mean, you mentioned the snake. The snake is one of your only 2 drops, and of course, if you don't have a turn 1, you're not able to play it. Were you happy with playing the snake on 2 in most situations, or is that a play that you don't like to make?
Yeah, so I would say Snake is like a backup Flynn.
Mm-hmm.
In my previous version with Cusco and Snake, I think Snake was probably the primary play, and Cusco was kind of just like a pop the magic broom kind of card. But now, like, I do realize the power of like holding Snake to bounce the rabbit right on turn 5. That's
Yeah.
probably the most powerful thing in the deck. Like 1-drop, Flynn, Sisu, Rabbit, Snake, plus Maleficent. That's like the nuts. I would say.
That does actually sound
Yeah,
really nice.
yeah,
Snake and Maleficent on 5. Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I like had 4 copies of each. I think if you ever get to open that on the play, you basically win, like no matter what. Um, in my previous version with Cusco, the nuts was probably 1-drop, Snake, Maleficent, Rabbit into another Snake, another Maleficent. So that was a little bit harder to pull off, right? Because it's like the same card, right? So I think adding the Flynn Sisu definitely helped the consistency of the deck because now you're able to add more twos and threes to the combo.
Yep. That's so interesting. I mean, the other thing you mentioned there, the Teeth and Ambitions almost being like a fifth or sixth brawl, depending on how many you play, and you haven't
Mhm.
got it in here. Is that anything to do with the fact it can be discarded by Ursa the Deceiver? Is it just because you don't think it's as effective as brawl? What was the decision making not to play Teeth in this list?
Yeah. So I think you did review some of my previous decks. And I think I do have some comments regarding Cusco without crab and without teeth.
Okay.
Um, so I think Cusco's value is not that like he can trade up or be able to like combat anything. I think it's mostly there to just be kind of like annoying, right? Like late game, you can play it, put it in a castle, and it's like a guaranteed draw.
Mm-hmm.
And even early game, if you play this like very conservative style of just like cantripping, right? Like you play Chernobog, you cantrip it, Cusco, you cantrip it, Maleficent, you cantrip it,
Cantrip, for
etc.
those that aren't aware, is that where you
Yeah,
play a
just
card
keep
and draw
drawing.
with it instantly, right?
Mhm. Yeah, or just even a delayed draw, I would still consider a cantrip. Basically,
Sure.
a card that can draw another card, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I highly value being able to get to the next card because sometimes the next card is exactly the one you need that gets you to the next, to the next, to the next. So, for example, like if you have Maleficent, let's say your rabbit is 2 cards deeper instead of your next card, right? Like being able to Maleficent and drawing to your rabbit, the rabbit will get you to your friends, the friends will get you to
Yeah.
the bounce, etc. And it's just like a whole, like, I'm sure you saw in the feature matches, like one card's led to the next, to the next, to the next, and eventually you just overwhelm your opponent with like card advantage, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
So,
sense. I mean, a lot of the time, Ruby Amethyst players, if they lose, they go, "Oh, I didn't find my rabbits." And I
mhm.
suppose with a build like this, you're just increasing the consistency of it.
Yeah, so I think the main thing is being able to find rabbit on 4. I would say that's like one of the kind of unsung heroes of like this version of the deck. It's how like my mindset was like, how do I maximize being able to find rabbit on 4?
Wow. Okay.
And I realized Cusco, he doesn't always necessarily die before 4. So
Yeah.
that was like one of the things that okay, he doesn't actually help that much, but when he does, it does get you 1 card deeper. Um, Specifically about teeth, I think teeth is only good if you can play Cusco in your deck.
Okay.
And I think the way I wanted to frame this deck was somebody told me basically they lost to Big Sisu when they were playing Green Steel, right? And I was thinking, okay, how do I like add this card to the deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what other cards would fit into this Big Sisu style deck? And before I wasn't playing Flynn or Sisu, right?
Sure.
So obviously, oh, not obviously, but if I play Big Sisu, I would also want to play Small Sisu for the shift bounce aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And if I play Sisu, then I have to play Flynn Rider, right? So based on these kind of conditions, I came to like this style of deck.
Amazing.
And
So, to talk
yeah,
a bit about the Flynn Rider, then. So you were not
mhm,
playing it in the past.
yeah,
So it was almost a lot of people are going to look at this deck and just see the Flynn Rider and think it's like an auto include card. When I
hmm
played recently, I tried out 2 of them. And
hmm
I have to say, I didn't feel like I missed the others particularly. I think it's like a controversial decision that I went for, but I thought it was reasonable. So it was actually because you wanted the big Sisu that you wanted to play the little Sisu, which made you want to play Flynn.
yes, exactly. So I would say in Chicago, I when I didn't play it, I lost to Sky in like top 32.
Okay.
And I felt like the reason why I lost was because I wasn't able to pressure him enough in the early game
Mm-hmm.
to force him off his game plan.
Right.
And I think like George GG, he was one of the main like Flynn, believers in the beginning in terms of yes, like you play it and it dies, but that's perfectly fine. Like your main goal is to be able to get to that rabbit and you want to throw your opponent off their game plan for you to
Right.
get to your rabbit safely. And Cusco wasn't pressuring enough, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
to force them off their game plan and let them have their primary game plan instead of, having to be more reactive.
So you're only at 12 uninkables. Did you consider
Mhm,
playing, I mean, 3 or 4 copies of Medusa? I think that's definitely something which is going to catch a lot of people's eyes. I suppose, of course, with cards like
mhm.
Snake and Fox, you've got the potential of bouncing Madame Medusa back multiple times. What was it that
Yep.
made you decide to go for just 2 Medusas and only 12 uninkables?
Yeah. So I think that was the second part of the equation. In Chicago, I ran 14 uninkables. I
Mm-hmm.
was 4 rabbit, 4 B prep, 3 Medusa, 3 Tremaine.
Okay.
Um, so I think no matter what, you obviously have to run rabbit. And I think the B prep, some people are going down to 3.
Mm,
And I think that's probably not correct. I think
yeah.
it's probably the best card in the game. Like it saves you in spots where you're not supposed to win, right? Like
We,
it
we
gets you
saw
out of
on the broadcast the top 64 match, the Ruby Amethyst player up against Emerald Steel, and their whole
Mhm.
game plan came down to can I draw B prep? And the whole time I was
Yeah.
thinking, I bet they wish they played 4 B preps at this moment. And Emerald Steel is like the matchup you're saying you're expecting the most. I think nearly half of the top cut was on Emerald Steel. So
Yeah, so I know some people are like, oh, what if you did like 2B prep 2 Sisu, right?
mm,
That seems like a little logical, but it's like, why don't you just run it in addition, not in replace of? So that was kind of my like thought process.
yep,
Um, so I think something else that actually like gave me a lot of inspiration was Matthew Wright. Do you know him? He second place
yeah,
Atlanta lives. So he beat me in the CCS 8K a long time ago.
hmm
And ever since I kind of like follow his Twitter a little bit and I read his like post tournament thread and he said he was on 13 uninkables in Atlanta. And he said the reason why he wanted to go 13 and you can't really have too many uninkables was because you wanted to ink efficiently to be able to get to your goats, your castles, and your bouncers, and you really don't want to be inking those in the late
right,
game. So to me, that actually made a ton of sense, right? Like sometimes that lady or that BKU doesn't really help you in terms of finishing the game, right? Like I'm sure you've, like are aware of the situation where, you have to make a tough spot because you have to ink, right?
yep,
Like you're at 6 ink, 7 ink, 8 ink, etc., and you need to get to like certain thresholds to do like the power plays, like B prep plus castle or double castle, triple castle, etc. And if your uninkables are too high, you'll never be able to get there, like with 3 goats or 3 castles.
hmm
Um, and I also wanted the deck to be more consistent because I think a lot of people are making their decks kind of in like a high roll way, right? Like in my opinion, like 16 uninkables with 4 1 drops. You're just hoping for the nuts, right? Like
yep,
you're hoping for that Flynn Sisu rabbit, and then when you don't get it, now what, right? I think the Magic Broom and the Maleficence, in my opinion, shouldn't be cut because they help you fix your hands that are horrible, right? Like I've seen so many times where like you play Flynn, Sisu, then you do BKU, and then now you have like 2 B preps and a Medusa and a Tremaine, and it's like, oh, like what now, right? And in this style of deck, usually I've never ran into that situation with this style of deck. So I felt more comfortable like, okay, maybe the power of the deck is a little bit lower. Like you don't have that third Medusa, you don't have any BKUs, you don't have any Tremaines. So you kind of have to rely on, you know, drawing through your deck, setting up a good B prep, and then just playing the game from there.
hmm It's really
Yeah.
fascinating. I think the point you make on the low uninkable count, and I mean, many times I'm sure people can relate to inking a goat or a queen's castle when they don't really want to. And even though
Yeah.
the uninkables, we kind of look at them as inherently more powerful, at the same
hmm
time, there are very powerful inkable cards. I mean, cards like Goat in other decks, maybe Flaversham, and often
hmm
you're forced to ink cards that you'd really rather hold on to. So that is really fascinating. So
Yeah.
was there any consideration to go to 13 to get like a third Medusa in there? And if so, what card would you have cut down to do that?
Yeah. So yeah, that was a consideration. I think if I were to add an uninkable, you're probably right. It's probably the third Medusa, and then maybe after that it would be like a Tremaine.
hmm
I personally think Tremaine is slightly better than B King, just
hmm
because it's like a body that can quest for 2.
Sure.
I think that's why Sisu is also really good. Like besides the fact it can just wipe things, it's a 5/4 that quests for 3.
Yeah.
It's like it can end the game as soon as you slam it down. Like I think in some of the matches I just played Sisu and it's just a huge threat just on its own. And like the 5/4 body basically trades with like everything in the game.
And it can't
Right.
be discarded by an Ursula Deceiver, right? Whereas B Prep
Yes,
can.
exactly.
Is that something
Yes.
that was
And
common for you in the Emerald Steel matchups? You were looking for the shift Sisu line to clear Bucky as soon as
yeah,
possible?
yeah. So it's funny you bring that up because I was playing against this one Green Steel player in day 1 of Swiss, and he was playing like Piglet and Cricky, right?
Wow.
And Diablo. So he's basically playing like Green Steel teched against other Green Steels,
So this
right?
this
Which makes
piglet is a 5 cost uninkable which can challenge readied
sense,
characters, is that right?
right. Yes, it's a 3/5 with like resist 1,
Yeah.
right? Quest for 3.
I
And
actually saw
challenge if
that
you're
as well in Bochum. Someone was playing that against Frank Carsten. It was the game that Frank Carsten ended up drawing, which meant they couldn't quite make the top cut, and it was an Emerald Steel mirror, and the piglet definitely can put some work in the mirror.
Oh yeah, and with Cricky, you're able to basically attack all the ward characters, right? You can attack Cogsworth, you can
Right.
attack Ariel, etc. So it was a good meta call by that guy. Like this was maybe like round 5 or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
we were both like 4-0. But basically, what happened was he was on the play, and he was turn 5 Piglet, turn 6 Piglet, and he was just holding onto an Ursula in his hand, which makes a ton of sense for him, right?
Yeah.
Like in his mind, he's like, I'm gonna spam the board, and then on my 7th ink, right, he would just play Ursula, rip my B prep,
Yep.
right? So I had a Sisu. So turn 6, I shifted Sisu and then sang Be Prepared. Killed this whole board. Last card in his hand was the Ursula. Turn 7, he played the Ursula. My hand was like just 4 characters.
Oh wow.
Right.
So you sang the
So
Be Prepared?
yes.
That's
So that's
wild.
also a play that you can do, right? Because a lot of people are like, oh, I'm just gonna spam the board and then turn 7, rip your B prep, end the game right then and there.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this was like an additional thing you can do with a turn 6 shift Sisu.
It's so amazing. When I played Ruby Amethyst, which was only once, I did look at Sisu as I was like, could I just play a one-off Sisu? And I considered it. I didn't end up doing it, but it's so fascinating to see. As soon as I saw it, I really, really loved the concept. Going back to that third Medusa, was there were you close to ever playing a third Medusa? And if so, would it have been like a Sisu you lowered the count of, or could you have considered if you had to drop an inkable card, for example, and go down to 3 copies of one inkable card, which would it have been? Or is that just not an option for you?
Yeah. It is an option. I would say going forward, I think it's okay to drop 2 copies of Maleficent for 2 copies of like Tremaine, or depending on the meta, if blue becomes a little bit more popular, you can just take out 2 Maleficents for 2 Tremaines, or like 1 and 1 BKU Tremaine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you're gonna keep playing the Sisu, right? And I think right now, even without Bucky, I think this card is still pretty powerful because. I know that people are going to start playing like some aggro decks like green yellow, amber steel, these like green based decks, and Sisu is very strong against like green and yellow style decks.
Mm-hmm.
Basically kills everything in green and yellow, right? And especially if they can't deal with like Sisu, it's also like a mind game, right? If you think about it, you play a turn 5 Sisu, it's what if he has turn 6 Sisu? So they have to like expend some resources to try to kill the Sisu, right? Like in the top 4 match, like I had exerted Sisu and he had like Sir Hiss and then Prince John, and his hand was like the Kita, right? If you play just Kita, it'll minus all his characters. If I just shifted Sisu, the game would have been over, right?
Yeah.
So he actually had to like expend both of his cards to ram my Sisu, and I didn't even have the big Sisu in my hand. But just like the threat of it made it so he had to do that, or else I could just potentially just blow him out of the game.
Yeah, it was Sir Hiss and Prince John, wasn't it, that traded into your Sisu?
Yeah.
And then you had a Fox Rush to remove the Prince John. And I think that was the big moment that they lost the Prince John. Then they just ran out of the card draw. It's really fascinating.
So that's one of the aspects of open deck lists as well, right? A lot of people are saying, "Oh, open deck list, like they know you have the Sisu."
That was actually my next question. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it works the other way too, right? Like, oh, I have Sisu, I might do it, right? And then you have to play around this Sisu shift, and I might not have it, and then you just kind of did a very bad play into my Sisu.
No, that's so fascinating. I was going to ask you exactly that. Obviously, you mentioned the game in Swiss on day 1 where your opponent wasn't anticipating the Sisu. I can imagine you got an awful lot of surprise value from that. And did you feel like the deck was just as good in the open format then?
In the open format, definitely worse, I would say, because now people can just like my 4th like top 4 opponent. He was saying, oh, he literally just told me, oh, you don't have B King or Tremaine. I'm just gonna play this Tinkerbell, and I know you can't kill it, right?
Right.
And in my mind, I was like, that's fine. Like I'm going to just try to save like a Maui for when you exert your Tinkerbell, which is like a pretty common thing in this deck. Your Maui actually has a lot more value because it's how you deal with these type of like 4 strength characters that are not easily removed. Like in the finals, I remember I played like a turn 4 castle when he had a queen, and everyone was like, "Oh, that is like so bad. Like you develop nothing or lose the game, right?" But in my mind, I was like, okay, once he exerts his queen to try to like attack my castle, I'm just gonna crack back with this Maui, and now he has to deal with the Maui, right? So I think Maui has a lot of value, especially when you don't have like a Tremaine or a BKU to deal with stuff like Tinkerbell or Queen.
In your interview after the win, you mentioned that cards like B King Undisputed you decided to remove to kind of hedge your bets more against Emerald Steel and not worry about Sapphire so much. How did you find, for example, your Sapphire Steel matchup with this deck? Usually it's quite favored for Ruby Amethyst, particularly when going first. A little bit tighter when going second as Ruby Amethyst. Was that a matchup that you played much? And maybe up against Ruby Sapphire as well? Did you see many of these Sapphire decks?
Yeah, so the top 16 guy, he had the same deck as me, right? So that was actually the guy that I like roomed with on Friday and
That's
or throughout
so
the
cool.
weekend. So when I came, I landed around 11 p.m. and he had a different deck already, right? But as
Hmm.
soon as I walked in the door, he was like, "What should I play? I trust you 100%." So I
Okay.
was like kind of cooking some stuff while I was on the plane, thinking about it. And this is kind of the deck I, kind of ended up at.
Hmm.
And then I was just like, here's the deck I want to play, and here's the plan, right? We're gonna try to shift Sisu, and we're gonna try to blow people out, or just have this kind of, top deck a Sisu against green decks and just like blow them out, right? And he was like, okay, that's a good game plan. Let's go.
Hmm.
So me personally, I didn't play any blue steals the whole tournament,
Hmm.
but he played 5 blue steals.
Wow.
In day one, he won to all of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's at least gonna, win on the draw, probably lose on the play.
Yep.
Or
That
win
makes
on the
sense.
play, lose on the draw, right? And then in day two, he was able to 2-0 one of them just because I think, when if you have that kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, one drop, Flynn, Sisu, Castle, or Goat play, like sometimes actually they just don't have any answer to that, even if you don't have BKU or Tremaine, right? So you can still take the games off of them. And since I think something else that kind of is like a byproduct of what I said earlier, in terms of if you have a lower amount of uninkables, you're able to set up these plays much easier,
Mm.
right? Like think about it like when you have your 4 1 drops with your 16 uninkables, how often were you able to do, Chernobog, Flynn, Sisu, Goat, right? That requires 4 inkables to play this, and you like didn't draw any cards
Right.
in the meantime, right? But in this deck, you have way more flexibility in terms of being able to ink cards and do this like play setup.
Hmm.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
No, that's so cool. That's so. It's a very impressive showing for the deck. So was it just two of you that brought it?
Yeah, just us two.
And
Yeah.
you both made top 16. That is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
With your friend? Have you played previous card games with them?
Yeah.
Is that how they
So
trust you
his
so
name is
much? What's your kind of
Hongshu.
background in card games?
Yeah, sure. So Hongshu, I play locals with him,
Hmm.
and he also made top 32 at Chicago. We both
Oh,
made top 32 at
wow.
Chicago, but he
Okay.
was running a different list than me. But we became friends during that time, and like he really believed in like my deck building, right?
Hmm.
So he was like, whatever you want to play, like I believe in you. Just tell me what to do, and we'll go, right? And yeah, he made top 16. I'm really proud of him. Like
It's awesome.
he never played the deck, and I gave him the game plan, and he did really well with it. Unfortunately, like he actually okay. So here's I'll talk a little bit, I guess, like about the tournament now,
Yeah,
if that's okay.
please do.
Yeah. So in day one, I was 5-0, and there was 4 5-0 players, and my opponent was Chris Croy, right? In
Hmm.
the that was first seed,
Yep.
and I asked him to split, and he said no, right?
Okay.
So everybody else split. That's fine. It makes sense. Like he wants to get first seed, especially with Amber Steel.
Hmm.
Makes total sense. And he 2-0'd me like really badly, right?
Okay. Wow.
So I was like, wow, like this guy is gonna. After that, I was like, this guy is gonna win the tournament. Like in my mind, I was like, dude, this guy is gonna catch everybody for sure,
Hmm.
right? So after that, I was like pretty down, but I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna, you try your best, right? Next round, I played Green Steel, 2-0'd him, and then I ID'd the rest. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a blessing in disguise, right? Like he forced me to play, I played, and then I ended up second seed because of that,
Hmm.
right? And so the day two comes around, and then eventually my friend is in his bracket, right? And then he loses to him 2-0 in the top 16.
Okay. I was gonna ask what it was that took
Mhm.
him down. That's really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So he was the one that. So he basically at that moment he took me down and him down, right?
Yep.
And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna meet him in the finals for sure,
Hmm.
and it's gonna be like not good for me, right?
Of
Like in
course, it's
that
the
moment, I was
second seed as
like,
well. You would have been going first all day on day
yes,
two. You secure
yeah,
second seed. I said when I was watching it, like you're going to be feeling confident you're going first every single game, but then the final comes, and that's just
yeah,
wild to me. That was the first versus second seed. I mean, it just shows how well
yeah,
both of you played that weekend and how good your decks were.
yeah. So yeah, eventually, yeah, my friend was taken down by him, and like I would say that deck is probably like 80% favored against this deck,
Hmm.
and the only way I could possibly win is if he bricked, and I was pretty fortunate that he just kind of bricked in game two and game three, and I was able to draw perfect in order to beat him. So I would say it's definitely extremely like lucky on my end.
Well, I mean, overall, you only had one loss during the whole tournament, which was against. that player. Lots of
Yeah.
wins. So was it 6 wins in Swiss, 1
Yeah.
loss, and then the rest IDs?
Yes, correct.
Amazing.
6-1-2.
That's so impressive. I wanted to ask you about your opinion overall on the tournament structure. So the 2-game
Mhm.
format going then into like the day 2 best of 3. What is your kind of overall impression so far of the game 2 format? Is it something you're a fan of or not?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. So this is not my first like 2-day format. Like I played in 2 of like the pack tournaments
Sure.
and like all the DLCs, and I've come around to it. Like I kind of understand, because if you think about it, if you need to beat your opponent, you need to beat them on the draw, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like regardless, right? You win game 1, the next round, your opponent is going to be on the play. So I think regardless, you would have to like win on the draw.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's still approximately the same as like best of 3, but you kind of just like save a round of like mental kind of thinking for Swiss anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I think for Swiss, I think it's actually a good format. Like I think the good players will still eventually end up going into day 2.
Yep.
Like regardless of like, oh, I wish I had more games, but honestly, like I think most people that brought the best deck will probably make it to day 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's just my opinion. Like I'm sure I know a lot of people are like, oh, it feels like unfinished. Like I want to, be able to like slog it out in game 3. But I think the format, the way it does make sense. And day 2 definitely should be the day where you can try to slog it out. And if you brought if you did well in day 1, you should be rewarded for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
a great thing that the higher seeding gets to go first twice. I mean, that's something that has been a bit contentious at set champions sometimes, where sometimes the higher seed doesn't necessarily go first, and that can feel quite bad. I mean, for me personally, I definitely like the 2-game format. I think just eliminating that coin flip at the start of the game just makes it a little bit more fair for each player. Is there any kind of strategy that you had? So, of course, you still do roll a dice, and if you win the die roll, you get to decide if you go first or second in game 1. Is there like and if you want to keep it secret, that's also fine, don't worry. But is there any kind of
No. Yeah.
strategy you have going into that decision?
Honestly, no. Like if I win, I just pick to go first. I know some people are like, oh, you should try to win the second game to get the tiebreaker, but like historically, that tiebreaker has never mattered.
Yeah, I think that tiebreaker is pretty negligible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the hard thing is obviously if you go first, or I guess it doesn't matter. Like game 1, you have to go in blind, right? And
Yeah.
I think some choices I was thinking about was like, okay, am I gonna keep like Flynn Sisu blind, right? Like what if I go against Green Steel? Like those cards are horrible,
Okay.
right? And I think, what if you play, for example, like, Pegasus instead of Flynn Rider, right? You can keep that in more, or I guess you can basically keep it all the time against every single deck, and it's probably at least okay.
Mm-hmm.
But Flynn is like very bad against Green Steel, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things you have to think about, like, can I keep these things? The upside of running big Sisu though is you can actually keep small Sisu even against Green Steel, and it's actually fine. But if you don't
Right.
run big Sisu, you really can't keep small Sisu. Like it's just ink, right? Like you need to be able to find your brawls, friends,
Yep.
rabbits, etc.
And especially with your low uninkable count, you can get away with mulliganing it. If you're at more, you might want to keep it for ink, but it's not necessarily a problem for you.
Yeah. So personally, I still kept Flynn Sisu in blind, but it gets a little sketchy. Like you just have to hope that the other cards you mulliganed into are brawls and rabbits and friends.
Yep.
Because if you notice that you're going against Green Steel, like you can just ink your Flynn Sisus and just go with your brawl friends rabbit game plan. And since it's lower uninkables, like you said, like you're able to find more playable hands.
Yeah. Are you going to be playing in Toronto in a month?
Yeah, so I already signed up for Toronto. I got my Vegas tickets. So I mean, I'm still gonna play. Honestly, like for me, it's about like the fun. Like honestly, these events are really fun. I love competing. So like for me, I'm here for the fun.
That's amazing. I have to ask.
Yeah.
Toronto's a very unique tournament. For those that aren't aware, it is the last Set 4 tournament. We've got Bologna in a week, which is going to be the same meta as we're used to. But Toronto is quite unique because it is kind of in between that period of Shimmering Skies release, but before it's available in major retailers. It is still going to be played on the Set 4 meta, but the Bucky nerf will go through. Do you think that's going to have a huge impact on the meta or not?
Yeah, so there's already a lot of murmurs like, oh, what's going to be the next like best deck after Bucky's gone? And I think the main contenders will probably be like green yellow, amber steel, blue steel, red blue, red purple. Yeah, I think that's about it, honestly.
Hmm.
And then like, your kind of obscure like decks, purple steel, etc.
Yep.
Um, I think green steel might still make a resurgence, but in like a different shell, similar to set three,
Hmm.
like the Curse Merfolk, Prince John, Flynn Rider style deck.
Yep.
And like I think this big Sisu plant will also work against that, right? Like
Definitely.
if
Yeah.
green or yellow is ever prevalent, like this card can still deal with them, right? So I don't think it's even bad to just like leave this in,
Hmm.
even if you're not killing Bucky, because now you can kill Prince Johns, you can kill Flynn, Sisu, Flynn, Curse Merfolks, etc.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I also agree that it's quite likely some kind of Emerald deck will make a resurgence that is more
Hmm.
traditional. I think a big problem for
Yeah.
those decks is that they have a very tricky matchup into Bucky often, and so we haven't really seen so many of them. So I'm definitely excited for that. I actually played Ruby Emerald at my set champs last week, which
Yeah.
I'm not
I,
convinced it's spectacular, but I managed to get an Ursula, so it can't be that bad, right? So I'm definitely excited
yeah.
to see Toronto. I'm going to be watching it quite keenly as it's like a very unique event. Have you ever had an experience like that where there's like a unique meta for just a single event?
I mean, if you really think about it, Atlanta was kind of like that,
Hmm.
right? Like anytime there's like a set that is already released, but
Y-
they're not including that in the current DLC,
hmm.
it's kind of like, after this event, honestly, it doesn't even matter,
Yeah.
right? Like you remember in Atlanta, yellow purple one, right? But literally the day after, it's like,
Yeah.
well, we're on to already set four, and like, it didn't really matter. Like everyone tried to make yellow purple work in set four, but there was just no, it was not a valid deck just because green steel was so popular,
Hmm.
right? And I think green steel basically made it so aggressive decks were not allowed to exist. So now we're in this shell where it's like you either play, Bucky, or you play something that can counter it. That's it, right? Those are your two kind of options.
Yeah. No, it's so fascinating to hear all these things. One thing you mentioned you
Hmm.
wanted to do was maybe do a little bit of a VOD review, maybe
Sure.
watch back some of your games. Was there a particular one you were interested in watching?
Yeah. So I think the game two of the red blue was very
Hmm.
interesting because I think he basically opened the super nuts, and like I was able to claw myself out of that game.
Okay, let's do
Because
it.
I realized, like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Ruby Sapphire as a matchup. Um, do you feel very confident in this one? Because of course, like the Ruby Sapphire deck you're up against is heavily teched for this matchup with two copies of Hercules. I think a couple of Vitalospheres as well.
Yeah. So okay, so set four, I've never lost to red blue ever,
Yep.
never, ever, ever, right? And I wasn't planning on doing it that day either. So I think against this matchup, I know this guy like I tried to tech heavily for it, but I guess I'll explain a little bit later too. We can kind of like
Hmm.
watch. So yeah, so I mean, this is like standard opener. You open with a one drop. Or previously in the last game, I also had a broom that I popped, and it's because it was open decklist, and I knew he had Queen of Hearts, and I didn't want him to get eaten.
Yeah.
So I'm okay if I trade with the Chernobog, but yeah, the broom I'm popping it for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. I think it
So
was
here,
the
yeah,
the first
yeah,
game I was talking about with the fishbone, but
yeah. So in this game, actually, what is his hand? Because I know he wanted to play the grandma to start singing the How Far It Goes, which
hmm.
which makes sense. So here, I mean, I opened pretty fortunate, one drop into Flynn, and he was looking at grandma, and I think he needed ink, from what I remember.
Yeah. So Grammatala is a nice way of offsetting your Flynn Rider. It's like the main line that the Ruby Sapphire player is going to go for when they go
Yeah.
first. They go one jump into Grammatala.
Yeah. So I remember in Chicago, like I was kind of helping one of my friends, like preps, like he was going against Ruby, Ruby Amethyst. And it's like, what do I do as like the Ruby Sapphire player? And it like I said, do not play Hiramon 3, right? Or else you're gonna get brawled and you're gonna get blown out of the game.
Okay.
And like this grandma is able to actually stall very efficiently, I would
Hmm.
say. So he opens grandma how far I'll go, right? Like this is probably one of the best openers
Yeah.
that this deck can have. Like this at this point, I have 3 ink and he has 5, right? So it's already like a fairly big discrepancy,
Hmm.
and he's able to like deploy another grandma, right? So now he's basically like breaking my board, right? Like I can't quest, I can't do anything basically, and I didn't open Sisu, so I'm kind of just trying to fish for a hand that I can play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. So they go for another popsicle. The Brawl gets inked. Are you surprised they ink Brawl and don't try to use Brawl to remove Flynn?
He doesn't need to remove Flynn here. It's not really a threat. Like he'll get to 6 ink eventually, and if he needs to, he'll like Medusa the Flynn or whatever. So I think once you get to higher ink counts, like 5+, you can just ink the Brawl and just like go for a Medusa play instead if you need to.
Yeah, and this.
So here he has.
Keep seeing how far go is so strong, right? It's one of the best things that Ruby Sapphire can do.
Yeah. So now he's at how much ink? 6. 6 with this how far I'll go. He has another how far I'll go, so he has 3 how far I'll go. Right now he's at 7 ink and I have 4. Right, it's like a little absurd, right? And he's on the play, right? Like from an outside perspective, you're like, oh, I'm cooked for sure, I'm dead, right? But I realize the problem is like even though you have all this ink, sometimes like you can't really do anything with it. Hold on, give me 1 second.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so they've got an abundance of ink. I also noticed your opponent, the way that they were laying out their inkwell is something I've never seen before. It was quite spectacular. Are you ever intimidated when you see an opponent with some really fancy shuffling, or do you not really care about those things?
No. I mean, honestly, I do the fancy shuffling too. So it's just like regular, like, card gamer fidgeting kind of thing.
Yeah.
So to me, it was just like another day, to be honest. Like, no ego. So here, you obviously have to take out like one of these grandmas, or else like they're gonna start getting out of control. Okay, so here I think here's an interesting spot.
Yeah, I actually wanted to pause at this moment as well, just based off what Jan was saying to me earlier as well.
Oh yeah, you can go ahead first, and then I'll
so at this point you've got the Ruby Sapphire player has the Flaversham down. Of course, Maui is currently the highest strength character on the board, so it's protecting Flynn. And I think what Jan is suggesting, it's going to be worth trading the Tala potentially into the Maui to while Flynn would still be the highest strength character on the board, unless you play something, it removes the Maui. But I think what Din Kong ends up doing is sings how far I'll go with the Grammar Tala. And what this means is that the Maui then gets a free trade into the Flaversham. And it could have been potentially a misplay at this moment in time.
Okay, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say, like, I think this is like a huge misplay. Like, letting me eat the Hiram for free and letting me able to play my game plan instead of having to actively deal with his Hiram, I think was a huge mistake. I think he got a little bit greedy because he saw that 4th how far I'll go, and it's like, oh, I'm just going to keep ramping. I'm going to just keep going, right? And it's like, yeah, he's right. Now he has 10 ink, but like, who cares, right? Like, you're not really developing you're developing your game plan, but you're not like stopping me from stopping your game plan, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the other cards in hand, there's a couple of Brawls in there, maybe another Flaversham, there's a Medusa. So there was potentially ways of removing the Flynn. I can't remember. They sing the how far I'll go, of course, but you just think that the Maui had to go, really, because the Maui giving like the trade on the Flaversham, do you think that's the big thing, or do you think like the lore gain that Flynn is potentially getting is the big issue here?
Oh, for sure, not killing my Maui and letting me eat the Hiram for free is I think is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I don't value this grandma as much as he does. In terms of being able to like sing this how far I'll go, right? Like maybe in his brain he already played 3. He's like, I'm just gonna keep going.
Yep.
Right, and I'm gonna have so many resources, I'll be fine anyway. And that might be the case, right? Like looking back at the game, right? But maybe in the moment it's like, okay, like I can just try to bury him in terms of like cards and ink advantage, right?
Yeah, and they get the Lucky Dime down, which obviously Lucky Dime early against Ruby Amethyst is a common strategy. Ruby Amethyst with no item removal. So I think the Lucky Dime play seems really good, but you just think that the error is singing how far I'll go and not challenging her. Yeah.
So basically, like, I get to eat this Hiram for free and like keep developing my own game plan. I think one thing maybe that is like kind of underlooked is like I don't actually, my other 2 characters like the Maleficent and the Flynn actually can't really deal with his grandma that effectively.
Right.
So maybe he thought that, but in the moment that's what I was thinking, like, okay, I can kill the Hiram, but what do I do about this grandma? Right? It's still like kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Right. So on my turn, I was kind of thinking for a while, like, okay, like how do I deal with this grandma? And I did have another copy of Maui, but obviously if I clear his board here, he's going to beat prep, right?
Sure.
And I was actually okay with that because my game plan at this point was trying to get to the 12 ink. Like I think at this point I was already thinking like I probably need to get to 12 ink and drop like double castle plus goat and just start going from there, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
triple castle or whatever. So at this point, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna force the B prep out of him and then start my kind of rabbit bounce train
Okay.
and try to catch up to him in ink and just deal with whatever he has, as I go.
I find this
So here,
like around this time when like be prepared starts entering the equation, one of the most
yeah,
difficult moments for Ruby Amethyst. So your decision is to go for the Maui trade, kind of force the be
yes,
prepared, and then regain the board
yeah,
after that.
yeah. So yeah, making them like force a B prep is not even like bad per se because if you have rabbits, it's actually still like a net positive in terms of like war of attrition, right? Like every time you think about it, you play a rabbit and you bounce it, you draw 2 cards, but you only expended 1,
Yep.
right? So it's like play 1, draw 2, right? And usually those type of cards are very powerful.
I
So
think a
yeah,
lot
of
of
course you
people,
do.
myself included, would have been tempted to play the rabbit into the be prepared because when the
Mhm.
rabbit's removed from by the be prepared, you draw. Do you think that is like not the way though, because you're better off with the rabbit still on the board and able to bounce back?
Yeah, so especially if you only have 1 copy of rabbit, you need to protect it with your life, basically, right?
Yep.
Because all your meta mims basically turns into like pseudo rabbits if you think about it,
Yes.
right? So if I have 1 rabbit, I'm protecting it with my life. If I have 2, I'm okay getting 1 killed. But one of my general heuristics is always have at least 1 rabbit in hand that you can bounce.
Yep.
And I play like a very kind of conservative and defensive style, right? Like I kind of just develop and then like develop a rabbit, a bounce, kind of just sit on like a Madam Mim for like a turn and then kind of evaluate what to do after that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here, obviously, he plays a Hiram, and my thought was like, okay, obviously I have to kill this. Like anytime you see Hiram or Diablo, those are like,
Yeah.
culprit number 1, you must kill. If you don't, he's gonna run away. He's gonna run away with the game for sure,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Almost
So he's
developed your
kind of
brain
like,
into the inkwell, not quite.
yeah.
What's it like when you've got the headsets on? You've got microphones, you can just hear each other
Oh
through
no,
them?
there's no heads, no heads. So here in
Oh,
this
it's
setup, there's
different,
no
isn't it? Yeah,
headset.
okay.
You can hear the crowd. Like that was one of the funny things. Like it's 10-second delay, and like in the finals, I ripped a B prep, and then I played it, and then like 10 seconds later, everyone's like,
Okay.
and I was like, oh okay, yeah, I see.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
So here, yeah, I'm thinking about like how can I kill this hero, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that my Sisu was basically very useless unless I can kill Hiram with it. And then in this spot, I'm like, okay, this is actually really good. Like you're basically gonna force another B prep if you kill this Hiram, right?
And so you want your opponent to be prepared, you hear, essentially?
I'm okay with it because like I just wanted to kill the Hiram and I only expended 1 card to do so,
Right.
and I'm happy with it. And this fox already like did its goal, right? Like it was able to bounce a rabbit on a previous turn. So
And
these
its
are
own
basically
friends
all
as well, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's all free cards, right? So I'm just trying to get to 12 ink, and I think that's one of the like critical thresholds in this matchup once you get into like this kind of board state.
It's fascinating.
So
And so
yeah, I'm
you're
seeing
looking to
yeah,
get to 12 ink specifically for double castle plus rabbit or triple castle potentially even.
yeah.
And that also comes
So
back to the deck building where you've not got this high uninkable count. You're actually able to hold on to those castles and continue to ink.
yeah. So I think looking back, I think one of my mistakes was playing this Flynn Rider.
Okay.
Um, I think I probably should have kept it in my hand as ink because on my 11th ink, I had to ink a castle, which was like pretty bad. But
Okay.
it was either I ink a castle or I ink a goat, and I had 2 Madam Mims in my hand, and I thought that the goat would have more value than the third castle.
Right.
So yeah, I guess yeah, we'll get to that spot. So I'm still like doing the same thing, right? Just trying to get up efficiently to the 12 ink threshold.
So you draw Be Prepared here. Is there any time in this matchup you're likely to play Be Prepared?
Yeah, so be prepared is I think it's similar to like playing against Ruby Amethyst and Ruby Sapphire. It's when you're able to develop a bunch of castles, all your be prepareds become live, right? Like I
Right.
think how the mirror is lost is whoever is forced to play be prepared first, the other person's gonna play double or triple castle,
Yep.
and then anytime you play anything, I'm gonna be prepare you,
Yep.
right? So I think that's why in the mirror and like in these type of matchups, the ladies are very powerful, right? Like Medusa, Tremaine, because those are the cards that usually force be prepared, and Be King specifically does not force be prepared
Okay.
because you don't have that kind of huge character discrepancy,
Yeah.
right? Because if I lady, you lose one, I gain one. So usually it's like, 1 to 2 or 1 to 3, and it's very enticing for your opponent to play Be Prepared, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just so impressed by how many cards you've got in your hand and how many cards in the Inkwell. This just
Yeah.
comes down to the rabbit. Is that the key?
I think so. Like basically, you can draw your whole deck if you really wanted to, and yeah. So I inked the castle here, right? Because
Right.
it's because of the previous time I played the Flynn Rider, and I had to keep that goat in my hand because I had these kind of uh, Madam Mim cards that I could use to bounce this goat.
Mm-hmm. And you're
Yeah.
still only
So
at
here,
7.
yeah.
Like you're so far away still, and with that lucky dime on the board, it feels like you're stalling this one out. I think it's worth mentioning no Tamatoas for your opponent, which probably helped you out in this case. Do you think if they had Tamatoa, you might have been in a bit more trouble?
Oh, for sure. So like I noticed that his deck was very slow
Mm-hmm.
compared to like the usual kind of decks, or maybe he kind of bricked a little bit, to be honest. So his deck was like quite slow here. We can kind of pause here. I can like talk about this
Yeah, sure.
decision. So the reason why I played double rabbit here, even though like that those are my only rabbits, is
Uh-huh.
because eventually you will get to a point in the game where rabbits actually don't matter anymore, and actually you're just trying to spam goats and castles.
Mm-hmm.
So approximately here, like when I get to the 11th, this is the 11th ink turn. I can
Okay.
ink on this turn, and then next turn I get to 12, and I get to go crazy, right? So at this point, I'm like, okay, the rabbits are like no longer valuable, and I actually just wanted to trade them in for more cards, for more ink, to be able to do this like castle, into Be Prepared, into goat bounce game plan.
Right.
Yeah, you can go
So
ahead.
at
Yeah.
some point you're kind of calculating ahead of time that you've got enough
Hmm.
cards in hand to be able to finish the game out. I mean, I guess like in an optimal game, you're kind of finishing the game with 0 cards in hand in many ways. So is that
Yeah.
something you're like thinking ahead to? Like, how many cards do I exactly need in hand? And it's like a decision on when you stop prioritizing the rabbits.
Yeah, so basically here's when I like looked at my hand. I had like 2 castles and a goat, and I was like, okay, these are all the cards I need to finish the game.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, I'm okay like forcing the B prep, because at 11 ink, if you force your opponent to B prep, then on your next turn you go to 12 and you can like spam the triple fours,
Yeah,
right? So I think specifically on the 11th ink turn, you're able to just deploy your entire hand and force the B prep.
it's really
So I
fascinating.
mean, yeah. So here I also play a Sisu. I don't know if I decided not to play the Sisu, if he would still go for the B prep. I felt like I needed the Sisu in order to B prep, force the B prep. I
Okay.
think another decision here is if I should trade with this Medusa. And I thought the one lore was actually more valuable for me than
Mm-hmm.
for him, because I was the one that was being proactive and was about to close the game out. So I value this one lore more than he did. And I know he had dime, but to me, like I would take the one lore and give him the 2 lore,
Mm-hmm.
because he would basically have to deal with my board for the rest of the game, right?
Yeah, those kinds of
So
decisions are really fascinating. So you're almost feeling like you're still in the position to be the aggressor, and therefore you don't need to take that trade at that moment in time.
yeah, so I'm just trying to finish this game, and that one lore is actually somewhat important.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, he B preps here, and like I just draw the cards, right?
Yep.
And I drew like a friends, and I know some people would be, oh yeah, why didn't you play this friends, right? But it's like at this point, I didn't need to. I already had all the
Yes.
cards I needed to assemble like victory, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So
It's like you said, you know you've got enough cards in hand. So is the friends going into the Inkwell?
oh yeah. So here I inked the friends because I don't need it, right?
Yep, absolutely. As good as friends is, right? Like at some point, it's like you say, you oh my, that is so disgusting. That is just
Yeah. So
unbelievable.
yeah. So I did draw. Luckily, I did draw the fourth Queen's Castle,
Yeah.
because my other plan was like Queen's Castle, Goat, but this is also like pretty good,
Oh
right?
my goodness, that is maybe
Oh,
one of the
I get
most
to keep.
ridiculous plays I've ever seen.
Yeah, so I get to keep like a goat and 2 bounces on my hand with a B prep. So basically, like my game plan was he was probably gonna play a Maui plus Queen, or just Maui with the Vital Sphere, or like a Hercules, and then I was just gonna B prep whatever he played this turn,
Yep.
and then set up a goat bounce, because B prep plus goat plus snake is 13 ink. So I can just ink whatever I draw off the top, and like most of my cards are inkable, right? So I was
Right.
gonna ink whatever off the top, go for the goat bounce, and then on the final turn go for goat bounce goat. So that was my already like game plan that I was trying to assemble,
Uh-huh.
starting from like that sixth turn, right?
Yeah,
So in
so
this,
fascinating. When I played Ruby Amethyst, I did not get anywhere near 12 ink. Is it just this matchup in particular you're getting this heavy on ink, or is it also in like Ruby Amethyst mirrors?
Oh, mirrors are yeah, they get to like these kind of slogfest, very ink intensive
Yeah,
like situations. And I would say like a lot of the time how the games end is like some kind of triple castle into like triple goat.
yeah,
So I've noticed like some like when I was watching like the CCS when like Luca won that one, that's how he won. He like spammed a bunch of castles, and then when he had 12 ink, he went for the triple goat play. Right? Because once you do triple goat, the game's over, right? Like triple goat, you're gonna quest with everything, be prep, that's like 9 lore, right?
yeah.
And you probably got 1 tick or 2 ticks off of your like, your castles. Like maybe they'll deal with one, but you still get all these that, get to trigger, right? So yeah, I mean at this point, I think he's just thinking about like, okay, like how do I deal with the next castle after this?
Yeah.
Because he has to hope that I don't have this B prep, right, in order to stop him from killing the castles.
Do you ever go above 12 ink in this deck, or is 12 ink like the upper limit that you never go past?
12 is a good number, especially if you're playing like Tremaines and
Hmm.
Medusas, because 6+6, right? So 12 is always very solid. You can do triple fours. You can do goat, fox, goat. That's
Yep.
like 11. So 12
Oh, there
is
you go.
always like
You
a
got
very,
13 here, it looks like, with that
yeah.
Maleficent ink.
So 13, yeah, yeah. So 13 specifically is for the B prep plus goat plus snake,
Okay,
right? So it actually works out very, very nicely.
perfect. And you did it right there. B prep, goat, snake, and you still got those 2 castles on the board as well, which are a real problem. And suddenly,
Yeah,
you've just started racking up this lore out of nowhere, and your opponent hasn't found like the Tamatoa that they're looking for. Have to
yeah,
hard cast, dig a little deeper. Of course, they have that
yeah.
Vitalosphere on the board, so if they could find a Tamatoa, for example, they could
Hmm.
get a 7 strength Tamatoa with Rush to remove a castle.
Yeah, so this actually goes back to where I was saying, like, I value that one lore member on the fox, the
Yeah.
play. So if he kills this other castle and I still have this snake and this other castle alive, I would gain 3 lore, and then I would be at 17, and a goat bounce goat would perfectly go to 20.
Hmm.
If I traded that turn, I would only have 19, right? And if he cleared out that other castle, he could potentially still win with like a lucky Tamato into like many items and a lucky dime.
Yeah.
But because I have so much like board pressure, he has to deal with these castles and these characters before he can even think about playing Tamatoa. So he's on the like extreme back foot, right, with this triple castle play.
Yeah. So even with the
So yeah, this
Hercules
one's
tech, you've still got a castle sticking around for a bit
yeah.
longer. Is there anything at this moment in time you're looking for off the top, or you just
No,
got
I
it?
mean, I already,
Simple as
yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, in that spot, I was just looking. I mean, I already had it locked up. I had to go bounce goat in my hand. And I think I was talking to Reese a little bit, and he said in the chat, everyone was like crucifying me. Why didn't you go for the double castle, right? Like
Uh-huh.
that's very strong, right? Double castle. But in that spot, if you look at when I had 8, he already had a Vitalosphere out, right?
Uh-huh.
So even if I double castle, he'll just instantly blow one up, and then the next turn probably instantly blow up the other one, right? And if that happened, I would only gain like 2 lore, right?
So that
If
was when
he
you
kills
were
one,
when you were at 8 ink.
yeah, or like when I was like going into my 18th turn, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, yeah, yeah, exactly here. So here, I see suit, he's gonna B prep, right? So
Yeah.
I think everybody and was like, oh, why don't you just go for the double castle here, right? See, like he already has his Vitalosphere out, and like basically one will instantly die, and then the other one will probably instantly die because I know he runs like Hercules, right?
Yeah.
So in this spot, I thought double castle was actually not, and like my lore count, right? I was like, was I at 7?
Yeah.
Yeah, like I thought this was actually not, even double castle here would not be enough to win the game, right? He'll easily pick one off, and then he'll pick the second one off very easily.
Hmm.
So my plan was like, you have to go even bigger than that, right, in order to close this game out.
Ed, have you got
Yeah,
time to look at another game, or should we call it there? It's up
yeah,
to
yeah.
you.
We can look at the last game. That one, I think that one was pretty interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I think another aspect of this game that was not caught on camera was like I beat him pretty handily in game 2.
Hmm.
And I think that kind of like I can tell he was physically a little bit shook by that. Like
Right.
I can see like he was losing a little bit of his confidence. So I kind of like try to use that to my advantage in terms of like just being more confident in my play and just like, trying like actually try to like win the game, right? Because before I was a little bit defeated, but after beating, like I think it was like the tides have kind of turned. Like
Hmm.
I was gaining the confidence and he was kind of losing it a little bit. So I think that actually had a big part to do with it. So I think that's potentially why he might have, made some misplays in game 3.
First
But
versus
definitely, yeah,
second seed in the top 64, by the way. Like 2,000 players, you get first and second seed day 1, and then you both make it through to the finals. Is that like some people might say that that's suggesting that going first is this huge advantage? Do you think that's the case, or do you think you were just both on fire this weekend?
No. Going first is huge. Like when he beat me, I was like, oh, this guy's gonna win the tournament for sure. Like I was actually very confident he was gonna win, and I was really like we are obviously on opposite sides of the bracket, and I was really hoping maybe like a red blue or blue steel would take him out. But I mean, he crushed everybody going first, right? Like even if he didn't open the nuts like one time, he'll open the nuts the second time, and he'll just crush you, right? So yeah, this game, So I think it was very interesting that I think the reason why he didn't want to wheel was because he wanted to develop the flute. As you know, flute is extremely powerful against Ruby Amethyst because there's no interaction. So
Queen Shift says the option of whole new world here. There's 2 whole new worlds.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you think were you scared of whole new world coming through at this point, or do you not care?
I mean, I don't have a choice, right? I can't control like the cards, right?
Sure.
It's like if he does it, he does it.
So, but are you in this position? Are you happy to see that no whole new world's gone through, or do you really not care? You're just playing your own game.
Honestly, I think in the beginning you're just playing your own game, developing to the board. If he wheels, he wheels. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Right? You play the best with it we have.
Yep.
So, I think here there was an interesting decision to either play Flynn, or I also had a broom, like some combination of like broom plus Chernobog. And I thought that it was better to just develop 2 1-drops over the Flynn because, like, if it dies, then if he has swords, right? It's the same thing, honestly, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't value the cards in my hand as much as I valued the board presence. So, like, I wanted to really try to fight for the board, right?
Because I know is a big moment, right? The Baloo comes through as a bodyguard, and then the whole new world sang, which gets rid of the Sleepy's flute. What do you think about this play?
I think this is fine. Like, if you look at it just from the board state, like my Chernobogs can kill the blue, but I still really can't deal with this queen. And Baloo is actually very like secret OP, I feel like, in Amber Steel. Just because it's guaranteed like 2 lore. That's like huge. And it can protect some of your small guys. And it can sing like all the 3-cost things. Like in day 1, he just like destroyed me. He played Baloo and then sang like World's Greatest to kill my Sisu.
Wow.
Right? I know a lot of people are like, oh, what's World's Greatest for? Oh, Queen combo, kill Tamatoa, kill like, Maui. But actually, the secret is that it can kill Sisu on turn 3. Yeah. Right? And I was extremely caught off guard by that. Like, I play Flynn, he sings Storm. I play Sisu, he plays Zeus. World's Greatest. Like, basically, he just kept me off the board, cleared everything, and then when he ran out of juice, wheeled me, he just, like, completely annihilated me. Like, after that, I was like, dude, this is... Like, he's going to win the tournament for sure. Yeah. Right.
No, the Baloo's so interesting. I mean, also, we saw, like, Zach Bivens get top seed with Amber Steel, I think, in the previous North American tournament. They were on Pride Lands and flutes. Maybe this Baloo instead of the Pride Lands can also just give you that like little bit of extra guaranteed lore against Ruby Sapphire. I'm not sure. I have to say, Ed, I actually in one of my previous videos I dubbed this like triple Chernobogs or triple Broom by turn 2 the Speci Special, which I don't think I can call it anymore. I love this line. Is it a line you also like to go for? Like all these 1-drops?
And it doesn't, I mean, honestly, it doesn't come up that often. Like most of the time, if you have like a lot of 1-drops, you're inking them going Flynn Sisu. Yeah. But specifically against this player in this spot going second, I value the board control more. So I think I didn't do it in this entire tournament. I just did it in this particular spot because I valued the board. Okay. So in this spot, obviously the best thing I could have here is probably Fox, right? And then if I had Fox, I can like hit the Baloos. And then bounce back the Chernobog and then, hit the queen. Yeah. Best case scenario. But I didn't have Fox. Okay. Right? So the best thing I do
2 in the discard.
Sisu. Yeah. So I had to play Sisu here and then I had to kill this blue. And then here's the next interesting spot. So you can pause real quick.
Yep.
So in this spot, a lot of people were like, oh, why don't you just pop this Chernobog and like draw a card? Wouldn't that be good? And this was like post wheel, right? So I already had like a ton of cards in my hand, like 6 cards in my hand. Yep. And I feel like that 1 extra card was worth less than just having 1 extra body on the board that could potentially like fight this queen, right? For example, like let's say he kills one of my Chernobogs, then I could still use the other 2 Chernobogs to kill this queen. And since I already had 2 exposed Chernobogs, the third one actually doesn't mean anything. Right, because it's not like he can like challenge all 3 in one turn, right? He only can challenge 1 at a time. In this spot.
I think like one thing where that's not the case is up against the grab your swords, which I think I saw in Chris's hand. Are you worried about grab
Yeah.
your swords in this position? And does that ever make you consider drawing with
Yeah.
the third Chernobog?
So yeah, so that would be the hedge. And like if he has it, he has it. I don't actually think it actually changes the game that much. Like drawing one card deeper against this opponent specifically, I felt was very not important.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, I love drawing cards, right? But against wheel decks, you can't just be like, oh, let me draw my whole deck, wheel my whole deck, and I die, right? So against this specific matchup, I value the board way more, and that's why I decided not to pop it. And I'm okay exposing it because he can only like realistically deal with one if he decides to challenge. But even if he has swords, he has swords. Like I'm playing to my outs, right? Like I need to fight for the board, and if he wipes it, he wipes it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can continue from here.
I just wanted to talk about like the Chernobygs and Brooms. Do you think like these kinds of decisions are some of the more difficult things to do with this deck? I think like when I've watched a lot of people play, I feel like the Chernobygs is kind of over inked, or it is like you draw with it too soon. A lot of people. Would you agree that like the Brooms and Chernobygs are two of the harder cards to kind of play optimally?
I think once you play it enough, you'll realize when to pop it. Against, like, for example, I think the best example is when you play against Ruby Sapphire. When do you pop the Chernobygs and the Brooms, right?
Yeah.
And I like to think of it like, if they can start wiping them, like, in a favorable way, I'm popping them, right? But otherwise, I'm just going to keep it. Like, against Ruby Sapphire, open deck list, saw you Queen of Hearts, I'm popping the Broom. I'm not popping the Chernobygs. 1-for-1, fine. But if it's 2-for-1, not good.
And yeah, if your opponent doesn't have the grab your swords here, you're really punishing them, right? And you're just able to cast
extremely hard.
Yes. And it's not like you could have drawn with 3 of them because you challenged the Baloo with 2 of them, right? It was only 1 that you could have drawn with.
And honestly, I wouldn't even want to draw with 3 of them, right? Because it's like if I get wheeled again, I'm just toast, right? And like I said, I value the board pressure. And if he had it, just force him to have it, and that's fine.
Sure.
So here I was pretty lucky that he really didn't get to develop anything, and he had to like use just 2 kill spells. So I was like, okay, there's a queen, that's fine. I think here's another interesting spot. I think I had actually I don't really remember specifically, but somebody thought I was gonna die if I just played a Queen's Castle here. They thought it was very like underwhelming. But in my opinion, I had a Maui in my hand, and the only way I can kind of get him to exert this, well, I guess he could quest anyway, but he didn't really have that many like ways to kill this castle, right? So like let's say he plays like a lot of 2 cost or 2 strength characters, a 4+2 is not enough to kill this castle, right? So even if he attacks this castle with his queen, it'll still have 3 health left.
Yep.
And I can just challenge it with a Maui, and he still can't deal with it with this aerial, right? So I thought that was extremely relevant that it had 7 health versus like a 4+2.
So you're almost like setting a trap for Chris here, like hoping that they challenge the castle so then you can come through with Maui.
Exactly. So I think you can already tell like he was thinking about like, what if he has Maui, right? Yeah. But it's like also at the same time, if I don't challenge this castle, then I might just die, right? Like this castle may run away with the game. So personally, if I was him, I'd probably still challenge the castle.
There's a couple. Is there Zeus in hand? Is there ever an argument? I know it's only 1 extra damage. Is that 1 extra damage ever relevant?
In this spot, maybe actually, because now you can kill with aerial. Right?
Yeah.
I think that was a very valid consideration, but I think he valued like being able to Zeus something else in the future, and just like if he needed to deal with this castle immediately, he could just sing the aerial with Zeus anyway, right?
Yeah.
So in this spot, I'm okay with his play here.
Tinkerbell comes through, is going to clean up the Maui. This is where like that 1 extra damage maybe could have made the difference, right? You'd be able to. Chris would be able to instantly remove that castle. I mean, it would be a little bit of an odd play, wouldn't it? Like, just 1 card less in hand to deal 1 extra damage, but it would have denied you 2 lore. Although also Chris would have had 1 less lore because they would have been challenging instead of questing.
I think for him, he shouldn't value that 2 lore that much, to be honest. Like, I'm okay with his play here, but because he's able to keep me off the card draw with this Zeus that he kept in his hand, right?
Yes.
So I think his game plan was like, whatever I decide to put in the castle, he'll just zap it.
Okay.
Which is, it's a good plan. I'm okay with that. So here, like, I really didn't have that much to do, and I just tried to like hope that he couldn't zap this Sisu.
Are you feeling confident at this point? Do you feel like you're in this game?
Oh, definitely. No. I'm dead here. Like in my mind, I was like, let me just try my best, right?
Okay.
Like I definitely thought like, okay, I need to somehow resolve a be prepared, and that's like the only way I can potentially win this game. right? So I'm at 5 ink. I'm not looking too good. I did sit on this Sisu for a really long time, right? The big Sisu in my hand.
Yeah.
I have a rabbit, a snake, and a Sisu in hand. And I thought if I could just top deck a Be Prepared, I can Be Prepared into a Sisu and I can end the game. And that was kind of my general game plan. So I was actually extremely happy this turn block survived because that means I could dig one card deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Because every single like I said earlier in the interview, like every card matters a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And you can it's extremely like prevalent in this spot, right? Like this rabbit drew another card, and then ink play a snake drew another card.
Yeah.
Right.
I was about to ask if there was ever a consideration there to play
Yeah.
the broom to cycle it, but I think you had to ink it to get that snake down, and you're valuing the other cards in your hand. If you had like a more ink available, is that something you would have considered doing, like just playing the broom to instantly cycle it?
Yeah, that's fine too. But yeah, I mean, I was just like looking for specifically Be Prepared.
Yeah.
Right. And I think this was like the deepest way I can go
Mm-hmm.
to dig for it. So in this spot, I was very fortunate that he also bricked on this aerial. And like he, or I wasn't looking too good. Like my hand was like, snake or what was like broom, Sisu, and just like not very like good cards, right? To be able to deal with this board on turn 7, right? I basically needed to rip a Bree Pepper off the top, right?
Were you believing in the heart of the cards at this moment in time?
So you can see here, I'm just like, okay, Prep time. Like, let me take a peek, and then like, I guess the camera didn't catch it.
Oh,
but
yeah,
I was
she
like,
got it. Okay.
I popped off on the stage. It was crazy. Like the crowd was going crazy after this.
Yeah, I don't even think I necessarily. I mean, it was like 2 a.m. Over in the UK by this point, so I'm not even sure I caught that you got the B prep off the top at the right moment. I mean, you could have got it a few turns earlier as well, and there was no discard coming from Chris, was there? So
exactly right. So it's like my thought was like I just need to dig it as much as possible. And,
Chris was on no bare necessities. Am I right in that? It was
no bare necessities. So I also like was extremely happy he just like passed his turn, and then I could like feel the win coming, right? Like I'm going for the kill now.
Yeah.
I did have a rabbit in hand, but I was just like, okay, if he's just gonna play some character, and I had a little pop off here moment too, because he just double Ursula, and I knew he didn't do anything before, so he basically had nothing, right?
Yep.
So here I just like just slammed the Sisu, and then the game was over. And in this spot, right? Like you just needed to put your guys in the castle, and that was it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching it back, and I know this aerial missing it put like 2 flutes to the bottom. I think I was being a bit harsh on Chris at the start, having like watched it back for the first time. Like, not sure like if there's any glaringly obviously bad plays that happened here. Do you think there's anything Chris could have done better in this third and final game that comes to mind?
Personally, I think we shouldn't be like too results oriented in this spot, because if I just didn't draw B prop, the game would have just been over. He would have won.
That makes a lot of sense.
And like the wheeling aspect of it, like maybe he would have wheeled me into like better cards, right?
Yeah.
We'll never know, right?
Okay, but in this loved what celebration from Ed there.
Yeah, that was a good moment, because like I felt like it was like literally David versus Goliath, right? Like he killed me in day 1, killed my friend in day 2, and it's just like this is my last kind of shot at him, right? And like honestly, it came at the best time, so I was extremely happy with that result.
Have to try and find the moment you got handed the golden Mickey and the binder. Are you gonna sell the Mickey? Are you gonna hold on to it? You got any plans for that?
Honestly, like I think one thing I thought about was like it's actually quite a bit of responsibility to get a Mickey. Like you have to go grade it and like keep it safe and all this kind of stuff. Find buyers if you want to sell it. For now, like I kind of want to just keep it and like probably go grade it at some point. And like I know a lot of my friends want to come see it, all this kind of stuff. So I'll probably like enjoy it for a little bit, and then we'll see, what we do with it after that.
What number did you get?
Oh, I got 66.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Happy with that?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy with it. I think Chris got 21, which is pretty cool too.
Yeah.
Like he got a good number.
That is a nice binder. Are you gonna keep the binder?
I mean, honestly, the binder is kind of flimsy, to be honest.
Oh, really?
It's just like a white binder and has some like tape on it. I would probably, I'm just gonna keep it in its original state, just because it's like, it's in a way it's like a trophy, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Did you get a trophy?
Okay, so I did talk to the PPG guys, and they said they'll send me a trophy.
Yeah,
so
I heard
that's
pretty
sweet.
I've heard the same. Ed, it's been such a pleasure to have you on. That was so fascinating. I'm so glad you hit me up for this interview. Thank you so much. Is there any closing remarks? Is there anywhere people can find you? if they want to see like more of your Disney Lorcana stuff?
To be honest, I haven't thought this far.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I don't really have any socials, to be honest. Like I'm kind of like a low key guy, and like I
Uh-huh.
just kind of pop in and out, in like 20 lore or like whatever discords that people are playing Lorcana. So for now, I don't have anything, but maybe in the future, I might start something.
I mean, if you do want to make a Twitter or anything like that, like between the time that the video is recorded and posted, you can feel free to send it to me, and I can put it as the top thing in the comments and whatnot, and people can go follow you there if that's of interest. But it's also cool to
Yeah.
see, just the low-key guy loving the game.
Mhm.
It's a great game, Disney Lorcana, isn't it? It's a good game.
Yeah, it's really fun. Yeah, like it's actually a really good game, right? It's
Yeah.
very well designed, and I think that's what makes me like coming back because it's very thought provoking. Honestly, like you can think about all kinds of like scenarios that could happen, and every game is very different. I would say, even though like some of the game plans are similar in the beginning, you still have to actively think about it towards the end.
Yep. All right. Thanks everyone so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you give the video a like, and see you on the next video. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye bye.